Hi there, David Jameson here, editor of conter.co.uk. Just going to do the first of a few videos I suppose we're going to do on the US election, all the chaos and carnage over there in terms of Trump's fighting to the line in this election, refusing to accept defeat, and the implications for the US, but also more broadly for the world from this situation. I'm joined by Jonathon Shafi of the Conter editorial board. Rather, how's it going, Jonathan?
Not bad. Caught up with sleep now. I stayed up the whole of the night on the election night, so yeah, caught up from that. But yeah, it's all very interesting.
First of all, Trump's shock, not victory obviously, but successes in achieving the highest Republican vote count ever, defying the polls once again to fight this much closer than many people predicted. What lies behind that success? And also it has to be said, in the middle of a recession, in the middle of a pandemic that he's grossly mishandled, he's managed to expand his coalition, higher numbers of Black voters, Latino voters, LGBT voters, women voters have gone over to Trump again, defying the ideas about what Republicans and particularly Trump can do with these coalitions. What does that success mean, and where does it leave the Democrats?
Well, a lot of people have said this, but I think it's a point worth making, which is that can you imagine this election taking place without the context of the pandemic and COVID? I think Trump would have walked it, to be honest with you. And I remember we were talking towards the start of the year before the pandemic hit, and we were looking at the situation and thinking Trump looks pretty unstoppable in the election. I think that would have been the case had it not been for COVID. I am surprised, though, at the way in which the Republicans and Trump have expanded their vote. I didn't expect that. Though I have to say, I was slightly sceptical of the polls given this kind of blue wave landslide to Biden, despite everything. Despite the madness that emanates from Trump on his Twitter feed and everywhere else. I did expect it to be a little closer. Not as close as this, I have to say, but see, when you look at the huge rallies that he was having, the energy that was there, the fact that, you just couldn't count him out. I think that was the key thing. You couldn't count him out. And so, you look at it now and think to yourself, well, what's the actual makeup of the vote? And you start to look at it. Florida's a place where they voted to increase the minimum wage to $15. That's been actually one of the key demands of the trade union movement and the emerging trade union movement in the United States, and that was passed. But, so too was Donald Trump elected. What's going on here? And where is he getting his votes from? Well, he's not just getting his votes from white Americans and from white males. He got something like 52% of women who voted Trump. You're looking at not just you're talking about college educated. He's doing better there than you would have expected, and he's doing better for all kinds of complicated reasons, right? But he's doing better among minorities, and he's built a far more multiracial coalition of people than you would have expected.
I actually think that, this is all speculation, but I actually think had there been no COVID, he could have won the popular vote. I think he could have won literally more votes than the Democrats. And I think that's a really interesting thing you point out, that in Florida, where the Republicans walked it, there was also, it wasn't even close. There was an overwhelming vote for raising the minimum wage. Exactly. Which tells you something. Well, it doesn't tell you something like, Trump's people are more left-wing or whatever, but it does tell you that there's real complexities in that coalition. On the other side of the United States, in California, where, of course, the Democrats walked it, there was also a vote for a change in kind of labour law status that means that, as with Uber, workers can now be identified as self-employed and robbed of their workers' rights, their legal protections. And that was, in the Democrat heartland. So it does show you that there are extreme complexities in this situation. So yeah, and I think it's a mortal challenge, or should be, to a certain way of looking at politics. That Trump, after 4 years in office, this is the other thing. Like, some people are saying, well, these are still just marginal increases. The vast majority of black voters voted for the Democrats, and that's all true. You have to remember, this is after 4 years of government. This isn't like in 2016, where all we had to go on with Trump was rhetoric, and the rhetoric often was chauvinistic, right? He's actually been in office. He's actually instituted the Muslim ban. He's actually, lots of American presidents claim that they're building a wall with Mexico, and it never really seems to get built, right? It's a fantastical idea. But he told the US internal security forces to shoot at refugees fleeing into the United States, according to some people in the US government. So, this stuff has happened. And he's still expanded his base and diversified his base, right? So I think that we have to be careful with how we understand this very complex political development. And also, I need to say, because I've seen a lot of people sharing around statistics that show that Trump did better among kind of upper middle class voters who earn more than $100,000 a year. Biden did better among lower paying voters and all this kind of stuff. But, and it's good to see that and to understand that situation. But it shouldn't at all challenge the obvious reality, looking at that map, that that Trump has really hegemonized parts of the United States that have suffered from deindustrialization, suffered the worst from deindustrialization. And interestingly, it's in those places where a lot of, for example, Trump's black votes are coming from. So in the Midwest, parts of the Midwest, 1 in 3 black voters voted for Trump, which is huge. And it's kind of obvious where that stuff is coming from. So it should demystify this building block politics, where you basically have a number of, and America's the home of this stuff. It was Clinton who came up with the triangulation thesis. We don't need to talk to the American working class anymore as a class. We can just break people into various identities who we then build into a successful coalition, right? Always a very regressive and ultimately dangerous strategy. I mean, to appeal to people on the basis of sort of very closed, like, racial categories and stuff like that. And it's done on the left and the right in America. Rather than appealing to people's genuine interests, rather than appealing to people, in terms of their class, in terms of social justice, in terms of, things like that. And it's clearly bit the Democrats in the arse. And I suppose it's also damaged a slightly kind of a theory of automatic social change in America, where as America becomes more diverse, it automatically becomes more left-wing. It's never the way the world works, really.
And that's, and sorry to butt in there, but actually that is the key point for me. The idea that there's these demographic changes taking place, and that automatically means that there's going to be more progressive candidates elected and all that kind of discourse. I think that has now really come up against the rocks. I mean, there needs to be a repudiation on the left, I think, of that kind of identity politics. And if it's not being made clear by this election, I think it will be made clear by what's going to come next. Liberals are completely obsessed with Trump. Now, what I mean by that is they're obsessed with Trump, the individual. They think they can boil down the way in which American society has been impacted in American institutions to one man, that is Donald Trump. And what they do as a result of that is they get to avoid all the much deeper questions which exist, all the much more material issues which they don't have answers for. And if they do have answers for them, they're not answers that are going to appeal in a popular way to the American working class. And so they're obsessed with Trump. It's interesting that you mentioned there all of the things that Trump has done, and yet despite that, he's increased and diversified his vote. And of course, you can point to any number of examples of both bad and mad things that Donald Trump has done. But what have the Democrats done? What has the Democrat establishment done over the last 4 years to counter this? They've banged on about Russia and Russian collusion. No one who's not a blue tick Twitter liberal cares about that issue. I mean, it's funny when you watch the CNN exit polls and they're asking about a range of issues, COVID and economy and all that sort of thing. I do wonder what the percentage of voters who were thinking about Russian collusion who went to the poll. I mean, it's just, but that's what they spent their time doing because they didn't want to look at the real issues. They didn't want to come forward with an agenda outlined by someone like Sanders and AOC and that kind of part of the Democrat Party. They didn't want to go anywhere near that. They wanted to focus on Russia and other things that were kind of related to that, dark money and Facebook and all that sort of stuff. Look, I'm not saying that around social media and finance and dark money and all that, I'm not saying there's not important issues there, but clearly that was a completely mistaken thing to do. Now, here's the thing, right? What do the Democrats now do? I mean, I think Joe Biden was always going to be a bit of a lame duck president, but he's certainly going to be that now. There is the chance that there could be some Senate runoffs too, in fact, in January, which could, in theory, give the Democrats the control of the Senate. But he's already said he's going to operate and govern in a very bipartisan way. And I think the biggest appeal he's going to make is going to be, in fact, to the Republican establishment. I think the networks and the alliance building, all that kind of thing, will be to correct what they view as this insidious presence in the White House, which can be completely boiled down to this one man, Donald Trump. And that's where the great problem lies. And I think they've got, just in closing, I think they've got to think that through, because where's the energy, if there is any energy in the Democrats, where's the energy coming from? Where's the new energy coming from? It is coming from the likes of AOC, the base of people that was excited about Sanders. Interestingly, look at Sanders' support in the primaries, and you look at his support from Latinos in the primaries, it's actually very high. So there's lots going on there, and actually I don't think it's just enough to turn around and say, Bernie would have won the election. Actually, I think that's debatable. To be honest with you, that is debatable. But what's not debatable is where the Democrat establishment are going to go. And let's be clear, they should not be allowed to paint any kind of picture of this election as being some great success. It's highlighted and exposed the deep-rooted failings, I think, of the Democrat establishment, and with it the centre writ large.
I think this is interesting because a lot of people said, so one of the things that is clear from the election is that Republicans returned to Trump. So, I mean, you already had 90% of Republicans in 2016. He rose to 93% of registered Republicans in this election. And, that tells you that these pathetic efforts that were made by the Democratic establishment to reach out to the moderate Republicans, the middle-class suburban Republican, that failed. But this is the thing, that's a dual strategy. That's not just about electoral politics. That's about the organic unity of the American ruling class. That's about them building bridges back into the Republican fraction of American capitalism, who found themselves relatively isolated in the last few years. So in the last quarter of fundraising from finance, I think Biden took 5 times more funds than Trump did, right? Which tells you something about, a section of capitalism's, uneasiness about Trump and what he was doing to America's image and reputation and so on. But they will absolutely, as you say, launch a program of rebuilding links. So, and this talk of bipartisanship, it's not to the 70-odd million Trump voters, right? Because that's the way they're pitching it is, well, we live in a very divided country. We need to, repair our divisions. They mean repair divisions with the Republican establishment. And that's going to take the form of what? Tax relief. It's going to take the form of little handouts and boons. And, it'll be made clear to the people for whom it matters that there will be no retribution on, say, a legal basis for what's gone on in the last few years. Trump presumably knows all this, and that could be a factor in his determination to keep fighting. But the Republicans are now in a very interesting position as well, because when I was thinking to myself, when I was daydreaming a scenario in which there was some sort of blue wave and the Republicans were crushed and so on, I thought, well, what they're going to do is kick out Trump and say we are restoring honour to the Republican Party and a bit of sense and so on. I think they're now in a more difficult position, the elite of the Republican Party, because Trump has delivered to them the largest vote ever for a Republican candidate. They can look at this coalition that he's built around him and see that it works. And that is going to change their attitude. So they're in a very precarious position in a sense. They have to work out exactly how they address this situation. They don't want to lose that coalition, even if they do want to lose Trump himself. And that creates acute problems. And I think as well, we should remember, it is not beyond the Republican establishment to actually be radicalized by that base. It is not, historically, it's been the case that the Republican establishment responds to the radicalization of its base by trying to embrace that radicalization. That's what John McCain did. John McCain was as moderate part of that kind of moderate Republican faction as you can get, but it was him who brought in Sarah Palin, who would go on to be, the big figurehead of the Tea Party movement. So the Republican base is the Republican leadership is used to drawing on those energies. And that radicalized part of the Republican base is stronger now than it has ever been. It's better organized and better networked than it's ever been. So I would not assume that they won't respond to that by embracing it in a way that they can control. People forget, if it hadn't been Trump who won the Republican nomination the last time around, it would have been someone on the right of the party, because this was after the Tea Party. This radicalization of the Republican base is an organic process. It's not just about Trump, though he has unquestionably added to it. I suppose the last thing I want to ask then is, what does this mean for the restoration of the centre, which is a thing that people have been predicting now that people like Sanders and Corbyn have been seen off. Some of the more kind of far-right challenges in Europe they're not really growing their support and so on. And, people have been arguing, I've been arguing, there's likely to be some kind of centrists, fight back, call it what you will. But it's clear that that is going to be a much harder and more painful process. It's not going to snap back and we're going to be in the late 90s again, you know what I mean, which is the kind of fantasy version of this. That is very complicated now, particularly if the international figurehead is a man who there's not a big support for Biden in America. There's a big support for getting rid of Trump, but he has very little personal charisma. He doesn't have an obvious project apart from that restoration. I don't think he has considerable, support in America, and now he's in quite a weakened political position. So what does it mean for that project, and what does that mean around the world?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and it's something that we're going to have to discuss a lot, because it will have a big impact on what the left and what progressive forces will do. Can I ask you a question though, just before we go on to that? Because when you were talking about the Republicans there, I think that's extremely interesting. And I wanted to ask you, how do you view Trump's behaviour? How do you view the impact of that politically beyond Trump the individual? When he's saying the election is stolen, that these votes are fraudulent, and so on, I think that in a sense that will give cause for members of the Republican establishment to attempt to distance themselves from him on that basis. On the other hand, though, that is seriously radicalising his already very energised support And that support are not going to drop this, I don't think. I think the election will be very close in the end. And I think there will be millions of people, millions of Trump supporters who, with Trump as their figurehead, believe that this election has been fraudulently won, has been stolen. I think the stuff about the centre is really important. And, I'm going to, say a few words about that in response to your question. But I just wondered, what's your view on that? Because it seems to me that you can't just turn around and say Trump's a bad loser, this is what we expected. I think it has a much wider and deeper impact on American democracy and on a lot of the dynamics that are now kind of set in play.
I think, the thing about Trump is, and I think people on the left should always remember this, he understands something quite simple, I think, about politics and about power, which is when you fight, good things can happen. And even if it's not the thing that you really, really want, other stuff can happen that, you know what I mean? Because it's like that thing people say about, like, if you're being bullied at school, I'm not suggesting this is advice, by the way. If you're being bullied at school and then you fight the bully may still beat you up, but it changes things. Do you know what I mean? People understand that they can't, that you have to be reckoned with. You can't just be made to do whatever you know what I mean. You're going to be someone who stands up for themselves, and that changes dynamics. Trump understands that. He understands that when you fight, it changes wider dynamics, even if you don't win the particular thing you want. If Trump can lead, if Trump can show that he has at his disposal a very large movement that is willing to fight to under all circumstances, it makes him harder to get. Period. It makes him harder to prosecute. It makes him harder to get out the Republican Party. It makes it harder to lock him out of various institutions. I think he also understands that if he fights, that this will help to create a mythology that sustains him in years to come. And that mythology is, we were betrayed. I'm already reading articles, and not just conspiracy theory articles, by the way, stuff that's just on the kind of like fringes of the media, but sort of respected right-wing websites that are saying, no, there is strange things going on in Pennsylvania. There are strange things going on in Michigan. So the mythologies are already developing, that this was a rigged election and so on. I would expect a very significant base for that idea. I mean, America is already a very paranoid society. I mean, a third of Trump's supporters have some affinity with the QAnon ideas. They're very prepared in a very partisan environment to believe that could have happened. And this creates a kind of longer-term narrative around Trump, a longer-term loyalty to him, a story about what is being done to American democracy. And again, this creates problems for the Republicans. What do they say? What do they say to a third of their voters who are very likely to agree that the election has been stolen from them? And what do they do, for example, if somewhere down the line the US state goes for Trump, or do you know what I mean? I mean, who knows what scenario?
Oh, definitely. And I agree. I mean, I think it's a real issue. And when you have people turning up at counts, shouting to stop voting, when you have, I shouldn't laugh. I mean, it isn't funny. It would be funny if it wasn't so serious, though. But when you have the president saying, just tweeting out in block capital letters, stop counting votes, stop counting perfectly legitimate votes in an election, I think that does something. I think that does something really profound to American politics. And again, it goes back to that thing of that we was talking about earlier about liberals being obsessed with Trump. They want to think that this is just a question of this one individual, and that's, I think, really what shocked people about this election. Biden, when you look at Biden's vote, right, and you look at his popular vote, there's a lot there. It's one of the biggest Democratic votes in history. But what people have been really shocked about is that despite that huge vote for Biden, that Trump's increased substantially and diversified impressively his vote. And that's where big questions, I think, will we have to be answered. I mean, on your question about the centre and kind of reasserting the reestablishing of the centre on politics. I think there's a lot to say about that. So we'll condense it, but I think it's tied to where is American society. I mean, as I said earlier, I don't think you can turn around and say Bernie would have won, right? But I always do go back to that Fox News debate where, I don't know if you remember, but Bernie Sanders was making a point in that debate about healthcare and redistribution of wealth and various things. It's a largely Republican audience, but they were agreeing with him on the issues. And you look at the vote in Florida for an increased minimum wage. You look at the exit polls around support for public health initiatives and all that sort of stuff. And it does seem to me that it's the kind of politics that Bernie was putting forward that could bring working class Americans together, that could actually promote a debate and promote a discussion across American society where no matter if you voted for Republican or Democrat, you might find some areas of agreement, right? And so in this situation, I think this goes not just for American society, but in our own and across Europe. I do think it's the job of the left to find ways to unite working class people on big questions in a progressive direction. I was looking back at some of the civil rights activity because I wanted to do some comparisons between the civil rights activity of the late 50s and 60s and today. And I do note that one of the big marches in Washington, one big march for jobs and freedom, and the logo of it is a black and a white hand shaking hands, and it's a really powerful statement. It's saying that we're reaching across these divisions to fight together for a better society, and that's really what it's about. Now, the Democrat establishment, the establishment that runs the Labour Party, these kinds of forces, people like Emmanuel Macron and all that sort of thing, they reflect what you're talking about. Rather than trying to bring the population together around these kind of big questions they want to see big progress on, what they're interested in is how do they re-establish the institutional power of the establishment in a transatlantic way? How do they overcome the disruptions caused by things like Brexit or things like Trump? Now, my speculation before the election was assuming a Biden victory, and assuming a far stronger Biden victory than we've got, that there would be a real attempt at re-establishing the centre writ large in a transatlantic fashion, and that includes, for example, constraining Brexit. I mean, already you can start to see signs of this, where Boris Johnson's people are talking about the need to allay fears around the Irish peace agreements, for example, and making sure that because they know that Biden won't sign anything off, in his own words, if it disrupts that. And so therefore, I do think you're going to see this. I do think you're going to see... So in other words, I think it's contradictory. On the one hand, I think you're going to see this big attempt of the centre to re-establish itself and to bring European, British and American institutions into some kind of coherence, and attempt to bring the Republican establishment and the Democrat establishment again into some kind of coherence. But what they don't have a plan for and what they don't have a mandate for is to bring that project into the population as a whole. And that's where I think they're going to struggle. And so therefore, you've got that kind of dichotomy, don't you? Institutional power will be with the centre and with the establishment, which isn't just Joe Biden, but which is also Mitt Romney and people like that. The Labour Party in the UK, now an official organ again of the British state, they've pushed Corbyn out, and all the rest of it. And so that's the challenge, I think, for the left. How do you confront the centre, knowing two things: that they retain institutional power, which they're going to exert as much influence over as they possibly can to try and remove people like Corbyn and others from official politics, but on the other hand, knowing that they don't have an agenda and they don't have a strategy that can appeal to the working class as a whole. And there, I think, is the opportunity for the left.
Okay, Jonathan, thanks very much for that. I suppose we'll have much more to say as this situation continues to unfold. I don't think it's going away anytime soon. I think this is going to be a long, drawn out fight with a lot of interesting consequences. So thanks very much for speaking to me about it.
Thanks, David.
And I want to invite everyone watching this video to like the video, share the video, subscribe to our YouTube account, and read conto.co.uk, and I will be speaking to you all again soon.